We're going to talk about the Suzuki Jimny today. Your average Jeep owner will get less upset about you getting a lap dance from one of their immediate family members than they will about you saying there's another truck out there better than the Jeep Wrangler. And I can say that because I am a Jeep Wrangler owner. I have owned 3 Jeep Wranglers in the past, but then again, I'm a bit of a joino, or Jeep owner in name only, because I don't get on board with all this silly bullshit like angry eye headlights and body lifts or those stupid fucking ducks. And also imagine Warren Buffett would throw up if he saw you put $20,000 into your $50,000 Jeep to make it worth $35,000 when it gets out of the shop. Don't try me in the comments, because you're going to have to have owned more than 3 Jeeps to call me out on this. But if you call me out on this, then you're admitting to owning more than 3 Jeeps publicly, so checkmate, I guess, motherfucker. If the Jeep Wrangler is the Bud Light of off-road vehicles, today we're talking about the Asahi. We are talking about the Kirin Ichiban of trucks. We are talking about the Strong Zero of SUVs. If you know, you know, because everyone has a Jeep, anyone can get a Jeep, and people who own Jeeps form their identities around owning a Jeep. Jimny owners, on the other hand, the cognoscenti of truck owners, these are people who either know what they're doing, or they're in a market where they can buy a new Jimny for like 10,000 bucks and they don't give a shit what they're doing. Either way, Jimnys and their owners are alphas. The Samurai was 6,500 bucks brand new when it sold for the first time in the US in 1986, which was 2/3 the price of a Wrangler at the time. Suzuki sold 100,000 Samurais in the first year and a half, making it the most successful first-year intro of any Japanese car in the US at the time, outselling the Wrangler by a significant margin until 1989, but we'll get to that. The Jeep, which is of course an extremely capable off-road vehicle, held the record for vehicle that had traveled the highest vertical elevation in history. A Jeep Wrangler climbed 21,800 feet up a Chilean volcano, the Ojos del Salado. I'm sure I butchered that. What an incredible feat. Jeep people who absolutely cannot help but face you with Jeep pride whenever the opportunity is present apparently left a sign that said Jeep parking only at the apex of their journey. And in 2007, the lowly Jimny, the modest Jimster, the Jamesny of the people, ascended an additional 200 feet to the 22,000 foot mark, and on their way down removed the litter that the Jeep people left behind. Yep, they grabbed that sign and they brought it back with them. That's colder than your bed in college. The Jimny's no slouch when it comes to off-roading. In this 10 million view video from CarWow, the Jimny performed just as well as either the Wrangler or the G-Wagon, if not better. The Jimny could be one of the best off-roading vehicles out there, and is certainly the best for the money. The Jimny's been around longer than the Wrangler, although not as long as the CJ, the Wrangler's predecessor. The Jimny was first designed by a company called Hope in Japan, but they realized they didn't have the ability or the wherewithal to manufacture this truck, so they sold it to Suzuki, who was more than glad to pick it up. Suzuki had a smash hit on their hands. Over 3 million Jimnys have been sold since its introduction in 1970. Now, depending on the market and the model, a new Jimny will set you back anywhere between a quarter to less than half of the price of the new Wrangler. Unfortunately, one of the issues that led to the downfall of the Samurai in the US was a Consumer Reports test, which said that the Samurai was prone to flipping over. Suzuki claimed that this was the equivalent of 1990s clickbait. In other words, that Consumer Reports fabricated the test results to sensationalize the publication of the test. It was later discovered that Consumer Reports ran this ridiculous flipping test something like 40 or 50 times with the Jimny going over 50 miles an hour. Not one tire so much as left the ground. It wasn't until they changed the test parameters and they used a driver who openly said he was going to deliberately try to flip over the vehicle did they even get 2 wheels off the ground, and that took some effort. You can even hear Consumer Reports employees cheering in the video of the test when they finally succeeded in making the Jimny flip. Incredibly dishonest reporting, and it sealed the deal for Suzuki. The test occurred in 1988, and in 1989 the Samurai was done in the US between this test and a price jump caused by a stronger yen. In 1988, the Samurai sold 81,000 cars compared to 77,000 Wranglers. In 1989, after the Consumer Reports test, only 5,000 Samurais sold. Amazing. Consumer Reports almost single-handedly put Suzuki out of business in the US. They stopped selling the Jimny or the Samurai in 1995. Now that's enough historical background for this video. There's plenty out there about the Suzuki Jimny or the Samurai's wild story on YouTube. There are links to some great videos in the description. I want to talk about my Jimny now. I've got the best Jimny ever made, turns out, a 1997 Suzuki Jimny Wild Wind. It's a hardtop, also known as a tin top. The 1997 Jimny specifically is magnificent. There are 4 different generations of Jimny. The first, 1970 to 1981, super cool looking car, but a rougher ride than your dad driving you home from the pub after he picked you up from school. The 4th generation Jimny is incredible. It's beautiful. Saw tons of them in Japan. They did an excellent job with the design. These are really good looking cars. The 3rd generation Jimny kind of looks like a Jeep Compass with dwarfism and maybe an extra chromosome, like a preterm RAV4. Many people say the 3rd generation is a great car. I don't doubt it, but none of them can touch the aesthetic of the 2nd generation Jimny made from 1981 to 1997, but the best of the best, the Jimny JA12 Wild Wind. And these were only made for about a year and a half. In 1995, the 2nd gen Jim received a huge update. Known as the JA12 or the JA22, the truck received coil spring suspension, so these are lovingly called coilies, and it got newer, better seats, dashboard, steering wheel doors, and the grille, which we'll talk about in a sec. The body's a delightful Japanese ripoff of the G-Wagon. The quad headlights, sweet-ass 90s interior, just the right proportions and ride height make this an extraordinary truck straight from the factory. It needs nothing, although no one will be upset at you for putting slightly larger wheels and tires on this vehicle. That said, you guys are looking at my Wild Wind and saying, damn son, why does yours look so much better than other Jimnys or other Wild Winds? The answer is simple. The JA12 Jimny received this awesome grille update pulled straight from the 90s Defender, plus the extended bumper allowed the lower fog lights to be mounted in the bumper instead of in or on the grille. This facelift is an incredible design touch. It aesthetically sets this truck apart from everything else out there. Straight up, this is a gorgeous vehicle. It needs to be protected from rubber ducks and contrast colored door hinges at all costs. My Jimny's bone stock, although the Wild Wind edition that I have includes some prepackaged options like a fancy roof rack here for my surfboard and some absolutely poppin' 90s colored graphics on the exterior, and I think a different interior pattern. The Jimny also has a hood scoop. I gotta tell you, fake hood scoops, they gross me out. I had one on my 4Runner, I just don't like them, bros. This one isn't fake. My 1997 Jimny uses a turbocharged 3-cylinder engine with a whopping 64 horsepower. Remember, I mentioned this is a K car. Japanese K cars legally have to fit in a box approximately 5 feet across, 10 feet long with a maximum 660cc displacement engine if you want to get all the benefits of owning a K car like cheaper insurance and taxes. So a fun little hack is to supercharge or turbocharge them. As you guys may remember, my Subaru Sambar is supercharged, so you're talking 0 to 60 in roughly 17 seconds with the Jimny. How does it drive? As much shit as I gave Jeep owners at the beginning of this video, the Jimny is not a great daily driver, especially compared to my Wrangler Sahara, and my Jeep isn't even really that great of a daily driver to begin with. But at least I can get it over 60 miles an hour without worrying about whether or not it's going to frickin' explode. Because of that limited horsepower, top speed on the Jimny, 75 miles an hour. I do have the 5-speed, and this is what I would recommend if you get one. Funny enough, the day before I picked up my Jimny from the shop for the first time, I had a nightmare I wouldn't be able to drive a stick shift with my left hand. It was one of those nightmares where it's so realistic, you wake up and you're not even sure if it was real or not. Fortunately, I'm on the Uber ride to the shop that morning, and I remember it's like, dude, I've driven a stick shift left hand at least 2 times before in Africa. It's no problem. It's a bit of a long throw, but most of the time your shifter will snap satisfyingly into place. You'll hear that high-pitched whine of the turbocharger and the Wild Wind blowing in your hair, and it just feels good. Yeah, you're limited to mainly city driving, maybe some light highway duty, but in my opinion, it's not that bad in that capacity. I think it's a popular take here on YouTube to be like, oh man, well, the Jimny, it's not a very comfortable car to ride in, but I think that's a generalization that ignores the sweet spot in the 2nd generation line. The addition of coil spring suspension in 1995 and the cabin redesign. I would take great pains if I were you to get a JA12 if you're buying, and I bet you're not going to pay very much more for a JA12 than the other versions of this truck because no one probably knows the difference. Speaking of that interior redesign, it's quite nice. The cloth seats are simple but fabulous, and they are comfortable. The interior calming in its simplicity. It has everything that you want, plainly labeled, easily accessed. My last two rental cars were a Mercedes C300 and an Alfa Romeo Giulia, whatever, and if I have to deal with another glorified iPad and dial system just to turn on the f***ing radio, I'm gonna lose my mind. The Jimny, buttons and levers, baby. The air conditioning blows cold, has these fun little spherical vents to direct the air. You've got a shelf, you've got a glove box containing the hood release on the passenger side, also known as the driver's side in America, but this is, of course, a right-hand drive car. This is a wonderful car unless you need to get it on the interstate. If you live in a town where the streets are smaller, where parking's limited, or if gas is expensive, or if you need a dedicated off-road vehicle, or even a fun beach car or second car that's inexpensive, the Jimny, top notch. But again, for your overall driving comfort, you feel like you're rolling around in a Spam can on wheels. And if this is going to be your primary vehicle, there's no comparison with the Wrangler. And only in the most limited circumstances would the Jimny make more sense as your primary daily driver. But you can't fairly compare two vehicles without discussing cost. Starting at like 60 grand, my Wrangler 4xe Sahara cost 5 to 10 times as much as a really good second-hand, second-gen Jimny. I got mine, as usual, from Bulldog Auto for like under 10K delivered. It's mint on the inside, just 25,000 miles on the odometer when I imported it. It's a fun car to drive, but also a fun car to be seen in. While my Jimny doesn't get near the attention my Sandbar van does, people still love it. They still want to talk to you about it. It's practical around town. It's a fantastic off-road vehicle, and not only can you move 4 people with it, but you can get a decent amount of cargo in the rear compartment thanks to these rear seats that easily fold up. You just pull this cord, you lift this locking lever, they fold right up. I guess what I'm trying to say in this video is between the blend of low price, reliability, utility, and pure fun factor, I can't imagine another vehicle, including the Jeep, that gives you more bang for the buck. I know I've said this a bunch of times already, but if I didn't have to worry about getting on the interstate, I would just own one of these cars, plain and simple. Less than 10 grand for one that's in excellent shape. And it ticks every single box except for speed, of course. But when you look this good, you don't need to be fast. Sadly, I am selling my Jimny because I wanted to import it to make this video. I've always loved the Jimny from the first time I saw one. I promised myself that I was going to choose between the Sandbar and the Jimny after I recorded this video, and the double sunroof in my Subaru is a worthy tiebreaker. Inexpensive, practical, fun, dare I say sexy. Thank you Jeep people for watching and being good sports. If you like this channel, consider supporting us and the other guys from TFB TV at subscribestar.com/TFBTV. Thanks again, and don't forget to check the descriptions for other resources for you to research the Jimny.